just share a little bit about my journey since it's kind of like a masterclass. How can we use technology to inform an whole topic like conservation, image generation AI, fundamental problem, right? Because it's using mesh.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our exclusive masterclass. We are thrilled for all Limau. My name is Jim Varnador. I'll be hosting this meeting today, this class. I want to thank and welcome Quentin Sim for coming today. And I want to introduce our speaker today, Quentin Sim. Quentin is a Singapore registered architect and digital strategist operating at the intersection of architectural practice, technology, and education.
So nice to be here. Thanks for having me. The topic was quite kind of like, I would say, AI generated in a way based on the profile. It's not going to be a lot of I won't say I'll keep this sharing a bit light, because I think to share a lot about like technical details, it requires like kind of a workshop. So what I thought would be better was to just share a little bit about my journey, since it's kind of like a masterclass concept, right? So I just want to talk to everyone. I'm actually quite surprised there's so many people here. So thank you all for coming. And I just want to share my journey. Of course, like in my career, like over a decade of experience as a practicing architect and a digital kind of technologist at heart. So it's like a learning. So I'll share some projects as an architect and how I actually transitioned my career to become like a digital technologist, and all the lessons I've learned so far. So it will take about 40 minutes usually. I time myself quite well. And then after that, we can ask questions, so on and so forth. So I used the title for this presentation, or rather this series. So every year I do a few talks around the world, and I think this year I reverted back to form follow systems. It's something actually I used in about 2019, 2020. And at that point, a lot of systems thinking come about. And I think it's more and more relevant nowadays, because with the advent of AI, I feel that it's no longer about ability to do stuff, the most simple stuff, but ability to think about what you need to do, because essentially the AI could do something for you, but you just need to know what you need, right? So for instance, you can't ask the AI to build Instagram. We can ask the AI to make a login page, right? To make a photo page and things like that. So let's start. So I would say chapter 1 is like the formation. So a little bit about myself. These are like some kind of childhood stuff where I start off with. I like to tinker with stuff. So I kind of built websites for pocket money back in the 90s. It was really fun. And you just go online and tinker around with games, mobile phones, just to have like sort of differences, right? And I think here, the thing I would say is that curiosity is kind of very essential, right? And this curiosity kind of translated in my university thesis project for my master's. It was quite an odd topic, because I really like to work with one professor, but his areas of interest was conservation, which kind of boring to me. But in a way, it was exciting, because I was asking him, hey, how can we use technology to inform an old topic like conservation, right? And we're not talking about like 3D scanning of old buildings, because that's overdone. So what we did was we looked at this thing called space syntax, right? And space syntax basically is the technology powering algorithms of movement. And from this kind of way of analyzing street patterns, we sort of hypothesized that a historical street could be pedestrianized. And it has a lot of evidence base, because you're basically running a lot of agents. And this was back in like 2014, mind you. We ran a lot of agents to simulate different pattern conditions. And it became a very compelling case that even if you pedestrianize the street, the traffic doesn't get affected, and the footfall for that area will get increased. So that became a starting point of using technology to talk about change, and to use agents as a way to look at how we can innovate for the future in a topic like conservation. So when I graduated, I kind of work at Woha Architects. I think most of you will know, and it was quite a shock because in the industry, as all of you probably are in the industry of AEC here, you understand that form essentially doesn't quite follow function. I would say form kind of follows finance. And if you read the book, Form Follows Finance, fantastic book, it kind of teaches you that a lot of things, what we're doing, we're not well trained in school. We're trained to basically maximize the profit of capitalists, right? And there's a lesson here. So in Singapore, not sure how many of you are familiar with it, the rules of urban planning are very strong because there is not a free market kind of approach where the capitalists decide to maximize the profit. The urban rules are there so that the real estate developers need to adhere to a certain level of living. So in Singapore, all the green area, if you provide a certain amount of green area, you get free areas, right? So for instance, a plot of land, if you provide a sky terrace, the sky terrace essentially is free of area. That means you're not getting charged for any of this FSI, right? In India context here, it's not counted. The reason is very simple. They want to encourage people to build public spaces on the land higher on the ground. So that kind of translated into this hotel project that I worked on. But before we go to that, is that in Woha, we kind of thought about a lot of sky terracing as a way to bring community upwards. So way before such rules were existing, there were already a lot of thoughts about how could we divide a very tall building into many different layers of communal gardens and activities. So you can see on the left, you can see this is a private residence. Every 5 floors, there's like a garden, and you can basically relax and enjoy here. And on the right is actually a public housing in Singapore. It's called Duxton. And you could see that every 10 floors, there's sort of a sky terrace, and it breaks it down to such a human scale that you could actually see your neighbors. So living in high density places doesn't really neglect the humanity of knowing each other. So it kind of translated into this project, which is very much finance driven and very much like the form I would joke, it's like a shape of a dollar sign. Intentionally or unintentionally or not, the taste of the season was champagne gold. So kind of suit well to make a lot of money for the developer at that time. You can see that the buildings is very simple. It's a plot of land that we essentially maximize the whole footprint. But interestingly, the whole footprint is not covered with hotel room units. We carved out really big openings called sky terraces. And instead of making one tower block of hotels, we made 4 different terraces, and each of them have different themes to it. So essentially, it's like a hotel, but with 4 different themes. And the big basis of this is very simple. We had to use the free area given by the government of the rules, but at the same time maximize the amount of profits that the developer can make and not compromising. So this is a photo of a lobby at the ground. And I like this photographer. This is not AI generated. It looks really fake because the photographer is really good. But you can see the lobby is 13 meters high and it's fully naturally ventilated. So all this area in the eyes of the rules of urban rules is actually free. You don't have to pay any tax on it. And that allows the developer to squeeze out more area for them to sell more hotel rooms. And in this way, it's a win-win because when visitors come into the hotel, they realize it's fully naturally ventilated. It's really cooling. And there's a sustainable theme to it. The terraces itself are actually quite interesting because we gave a different theme to each of these terraces. You can see there's a beach terrace with a mirrored ceiling. I quite like that effect because you kind of reflect the activity going around. And of course, it's very Instagrammable. And one more thing it does is it reflects light that allows the plants to thrive. It sort of gives like a visual hypnotic effect. And within each terraces here, instead of having a monotonous city view hotel, which you can't really see any parts of the city because it's so dense, you create like an internal courtyard, which instead becomes more interesting. And within the courtyard, we created balconies. So what you get, in fact, is a larger hotel room with a balcony that is not that bright from the sun. And you also get a different theme. So the developer here makes more money by selling rooms that are facing inwards and getting bigger rooms. Yet at the same time, they get more area, right? And this is not just finance. It's about the ability for the plants, the community, as well as the public realm to thrive. So in a way, if you look at what systems thinking is about, it's about linking the different kind of train of thoughts and see how we can weave together something that is not based on the waterfall effect or cause and effect. Because there's always trade-offs that you have to make. But at the same time, you look at the trade-offs and see how can we turn trade-offs into positive good for society as a whole. In this floor, you can see we installed a lot of these fans. I call this dry mist fans. These are engineered in Germany. They are industrial fans that have a little bit of nozzle that shoots out nano microns of water that become really fine mist that you can't really feel the air. And you can tell that throughout this project, we had an issue is we tried to recreate the same thing, but we said we wanted to use an engineer in Germany, but the developer was like, let's do it in Singapore with a cheaper fan. As you can see, the contrast didn't quite really work out here. So in the pursuit of all things cheap, you sometimes will not achieve your goals because sometimes you have to spend some money to get the targeted effects in order to hit the ROI. Now let's go to the main topic. What does foam follow systems? So learning from that project, we move on to Expo 2020 in Dubai. It was back then, we didn't know COVID was coming, but the project planning started in 2018. And I think here's the tale of the time, right? Expo was always about focusing new technologies, and in the Crystal Palace back in the day, it was showcasing steel, glass, and indoor gardens as a new form. So when the competition came around for Expo, for Singapore Pavilion, there was a question, what can we do, right? And the idea was very strange because the organizer, which is the government, wanted to showcase Singapore there, and it was the Urban Renewal Authority who was in charge of the proposal and the selecting of the architects. And we think really hard about how can we bring Singapore to Dubai, quite literally, but in a way also experience the way of doing things. So the idea was really, really much simple, right? We tried to create as a green oasis in the middle of Dubai, but what we did was to look at the whole area and open up the whole garden as an open space and layer it like Singapore, with many layers, and put the whole roof full of solar panels. The hypothesis was this: everyone in Dubai Expo was going to build an air-conditioned box because of the climate. We hypothesized that through thinking of reducing the air-conditioned electricity output, through planting of native trees, which actually in Dubai, they have a lot of beautiful trees that are quite large, in fact, and you'll mistake them for tropical trees. We could create a very pleasant environment because the expo was held during winter time. And with an enough amount of solar panels, we could actually make a pavilion that was net zero energy, right? So we thought about it and said, wouldn't it be impactful if we created a pavilion that was fully green and uses no energy at all? Now that would be a statement of using the right systems thinking that I think is what the knowledge economy is about and what Singapore is about. It's not about recreating just the look of Singapore, but recreating the intelligence behind how we look at buildings, how we look at our environment. So this is the result, right? This is not Photoshop or anything. Unfortunately, this has been taken down because the expo was over. But we managed to create a green oasis in Dubai with no energy and also no water at all. I'll explain that in a moment. But you can see on the top of the building, it was intentional that I decided to move the solar panels towards the edge to show people that you can see solar panels on the roof because the roof can't be seen from any angles, that the whole building was in fact just powered by solar panel. And you can see we were very daring in making the whole space open and using passive cooling approaches and also a lot of simulations to ensure that we can get the comfort that we need and the visitors can enjoy that journey. So this is another view. It's fully green. You can see a lot of people. I'm very proud to say we were one of the most popular pavilions. The crowd was amazing, and we also won the Design of the Year in Singapore. So here's the problem. With a hypothesis, it's not enough just to have a hypothesis. You have to work out the technical details. I think that's always the hard part. So what we did was really, really tedious, right? You can see that we listed down every single item that we predict will be used for the expo, down to even how many times you're going to flush the toilet, how long you're going to turn on the lights, how many times the lift is going to be used a day, right? And that allowed us to streamline down the electrical budget that was allowed based on the footprint of the roof to this satisfactory level. And you can see a lot of them were from the kitchen. And it also goes back to thinking, because we had an assumption, we baseline the assumption around some things, but consultants, on the other hand, will come back with some other things. Basically, the kitchen consultant came back with saying, it's like in India, food is a big thing, in Singapore as well. And he came back with 2 big combi ovens that could have hold 200 trays of food to heat it up at once. Now, that's restaurant grade quality stuff. But he didn't vouch, and my point was that it's an expo for sustainability, not for food. So it's okay to do offsite catering, but we don't need to cook a restaurant meal there, right? So we fired the food consultant and got someone in who would play ball, and it worked out really well. Now, cooling is another part of the story that we had to solve, because we knew that if the space is full of greenery, it will attract people, but Dubai's heat is sometimes unbearable and can turn people away. So a lot of these fans, the same fans that you see in the hotel, were used here, again, with dry mist. And I would say usually a photo speaks 1,000 words, right? Because in the age of virtual reality and virtual experiences, nothing beats the impact of a human body in a space and really experiencing it. A lot of expo projects are just exhibition panels for you to digest information about how great the country is. But how great a country is when you go on holiday is how you feel about the country. You feel the noise, you feel the atmosphere, you feel the people. And I think through these images, you see how people are raising their hands up, just to feel the air. In fact, we have a construction worker here. He was doing lifting. He's from Kerala. He's always chilling at the same spot. And I asked him why. He said, because this is my favorite spot. It's really cooling. If he stands here for 10 minutes, he could work the next hour without any problems. And this is the best thing because you know that through photos, through experiences, the pavilion is alive and people are reacting to the spaces. This is another shot of the roof full of solar panels. And I'm going to talk about passive design here. So they have all these little big tubes here. These are usually used for industrial lighting. These are called solar tubes. I got interested in them because I saw some brochure that says that it could just be a very big mirror and reflect light in. And I thought that was a really, really cheap way to reflect light into the pavilion. So we bought a few of them. I laid them off in a very nice pattern here. You can see everything is really, really perfectly aligned to bring in natural light, because we have inside the cones some themes and some artwork that require natural light. So in a way, we don't need expensive technology. Sometimes it's just to look around for different parts and components to assemble a building together for passive cooling. And behind the passive cooling is a lot of technology, right? It's a lot of simulations. It's a lot of getting the right numbers, getting the right assumptions to make sure that you are not bullshitting yourself and you're not lying to yourself that it works. And sometimes the data might disagree with what you're trying to do. And that's when you pivot. You look at the conditions and you redesign. So we also did wind simulations. We had to readjust trees. We had to readjust the pathways in order to make sense that we are capturing the right wind and the wind gets to flow around the building. So I'm just going to show you some photos. The ground. Now let's go to the water story. So besides zero energy, we need to think about water. Now, this is a problem in Dubai. They do not allow you to use water for irrigation of plants over 1.2 meter cube of water a day. That is the organizer limit because they want you to ration. So when we first came with the proposal, we got shot really badly by the organizers because they said, do you understand there is a limit? And we said, yes, we do, but we want to do something crazy. We want to make our own water, right? So the original idea was to look at different ways we could truck in water. That's one of the crazy ideas we had. Another crazy idea we had was the engineer one day that we worked with, structural engineer, we were having beers and he said, Quentin, did you know that in Dubai, people drill water to the ground because it's near the coast, about 30 meters, and they use the groundwater to wash the sites because it's really saline, it's salty. It's not suitable, but it's a fast way to get water to wash the sites without trucking it. So we decided to ask the organizers, is it okay if we do a borehole into the ground 30 meters down to get groundwater? And surprisingly, they said, yes, it's possible because they're really doing that. So we did drill a hole into the ground on our site and we got a desalination plant in the pavilion to desalinate the water. Now the calculation is almost very precise. We look at the drinking water. We look at how much cleaning it needs, how much vegetation it needs. We have to tweak the different types of vegetation and their needs, and then work out the amount of exchange in terms of the desalination, because 50% or 40%, 60% efficiency, depending on the day, and see the demand of it, right? So behind every little calculation and every claim is, again, a lot of simulation, a lot of mathematics, and a lot of confirming the details. And we did it, right? So this is a photo of a desalination plant. And you usually see this in off-site laboratories or in places where they need to do it for either research work or humanitarian efforts. Beside this, on the right side, you can see we have a weighing scale. And this was a little bit poorly executed in my opinion, because it's about zero waste. And I think right now there is still an issue. So if there's people interested in doing your business, I would say zero waste is something that the logistics and the tracking part of it is not quite done, because the only solution we found to measure waste was through manually weighing the rubbish and with the iPad on the wall, keying it the amount. And that is totally inaccurate because you can't do it. Slightly to the left of that photo, you have a metal box. That's a composter. We have to sort out all the organic waste, and we use the organic waste as a fertilizer for the plants. So in a way, there's a whole story behind it, but sometimes the execution could fall a little bit short, whether it's gaps in current market or suppliers. But you see, it took a lot of effort from the top down, the designers, and a lot of willing parties who believe in the vision to execute this project. So there you have it. It's a multi-layered pavilion with 3 cones. And essentially, there's not much exhibits. We managed to fight off the government to say that the only exhibit we're going to have are the plants. Let the experience speak for itself and then let people enjoy the journey. At the end of the day, we did some studies, because what the hypothesis of the systems thinking approach is that if we were to build and think like we don't own the environment or we don't own anything, is that how could we do buildings with net positivity? And the idea here is that if a land that is untouched, if we were to build something good on it, it can actually contribute back more than it was left untouched in certain circumstances, of course. And the thing was that it could control dust particle, it could reduce solar heat. And we compare that with a typical bungalow in Dubai or in the urban scale, the Palm Jumeirah. And you can see the statistics speak for itself. But yet this has yet to be tested up because we're still, at that time, we were finding projects to execute the vision on. But that was the idea behind it, is to apply the knowledge on a bigger scale and see how you could execute something with meaningful trade-offs that allow it to foster. Some photos, you can see you walk up a ramp into the first rainforest cone. It features some beautiful artworks and a reflection pond. There was like a lot of people throwing coins in the end. I think humans are quite drawn to shiny pond objects to make a wish. We had to display orchids as well, and we did it a beautiful way because orchids are the national flower of Singapore. And on the top, you get a sky market, which is a outdoor platform. And this was a very good viewing spot for a lot of people because they get to view the whole expo for free. And at night, we have some grow lights that help the plants to grow, and we have a light show, some LED lights, an avatar theme kind of light show, and there you have the expo. So after this projects that I did, I kind of look at digital system because that was partially my interest in doing that. And in the Expo project, we used a lot of different digital tools, simulations, and things to try to make sure things that work, right? And I'm also going to jump a little bit here, is that after I left Woha, I kind of started my own company just by accident because I had people approaching me. And one of the things at that time was AI design. Stable diffusion was just starting to take shape, and I thought it was a time to jump into exploring a lot of it. And a lot of people say, well, this 2025, 2026, back then is the year of AI design, right? From CAD beam to AI design. And it is true. So in my company that I set up, Studio Limau, we essentially use AI as a differentiator to help clients think about how to do it. So the way I would like to do it was I saw the picture-in-picture morphing approach very easily to test the client's visual identity and interest by morphing images. And the way I like to do it is through sketches, because the sketchier they are, the less constrictive and restrictive to the imagination it is. And it's the same for identifying approach. This was to look at transformation of a hotel podium to see what some of form opportunities there are create. As you can see, it morphs through different shapes here, and we finally decide on this bird nest. Again, it's a residential and hotel tower to look at different form approach and just taking lines and inspiration drawn with the client to rapidly go with the direction. So what this means is I actually don't have to even draw a line or build any model before I can secure a project. And that helps you win a lot of trust and a lot of projects much faster without actually doing much work. Same here, using picture-in-picture kind of approach. But one thing to note is that a lot of these approaches are kind of self-derived. They're not following any workflow on the internet. It's more or less what I think it works, and also resonating with clients to see what outcome do I want to get. By no means it was meant to replace a designer, but it was meant as a brainstorm kind of tool, right? Similarly here was to apply a certain approach to look at forms, because we know some of these things are not buildable, but to see what appeals and what doesn't appeal before we start the work. This is a hotel project in Europe. It's the same. They had an empty plot of land with a slight slope, and we're just seeing what kind of shapes the investor wanted to work with before committing to the project. And this actually gave, surprisingly, I didn't really like it, but the investor was like, oh, wow. And they gave the go-ahead to do a study on that. And also, when I taught some of these workflows to students at National University of Singapore and US, they're actually very creative. They came up with many, many ways to do things. So this is one of the master's students. What they did was they kind of reverse image query. So what they did was, instead of getting ideas from themselves, they ask the AI for ideas, but they do so in a way that's very funny. And I quite like it, because what they did was they asked the AI to generate images of Singapore culture, right? And then they weigh it and rank it based on its outputs over, I think, 50 times or something. And they took all the keywords out and then re-prompted it again to merge it with the existing site to see what it can come up with. And interestingly enough, the results turned out quite well, because it came up with food culture was very good, but street food culture was missing, right? So through the prompting, they managed to came up with a design that was, let's create street food culture underneath a train viaduct, which was the site. And that became a very interesting starting point for a project, because the student, she came in with no ideas whatsoever, but came back with a very strong design intention that could move forward with a lot of possibilities. But herein lies the problem with image generation AI that I find, is that you could do nowadays with Nano Banana really well. You could just pick a few images. It kind of could generate a 3D model for you. But I've worked on this project for a long time, so I can tell you a lot of things in the details are not accurate. And you can kind of make like a 3D model out of it. You could do this really, really well. But the problem is with Gen AI nowadays is that it's very useful for storytelling. And this is where, in my practice, I kind of found the stopping point. People brag about AI a lot, but they don't tell you that it's actually not useful for any outcome. In fact, a lot of the good architects, they are using it just for branding and bragging rights, but they're not using it to move on to another stage, because it's not useful. right? And this is the fundamental problem with AI because it's using mesh to look at technology. Because training pixels and finding correlation of pixels with a language model or a learning model, machine learning model, is very easy. And that's the way it's being programmed, right? Because you can compress it, you can do a lot of correlation and patterning on it. It focuses to trick your eye. So a lot of the LLMs have all these weights, reinforced learning. It's forced to trick the user upon intelligence. We do not know actually if it's intelligent or not because the weights are not known to us and it's not readable to us. And then people say, yeah, we can use AI for a lot of things, but it's not that true because in architecture, as we know, we need to use something called BIM, right? Because we need precision and logic. It needs to understand dimensions, constraints, materials. It needs to understand real world conditions. You need to understand that it needs to be fabricated. Okay, so I would say that here, AI can guess the triangles very well, but as architects and engineers, you have to define down to the milliliters, right? So here lies the problem that Podium, where I currently work at, is solving, right? We kind of need computation AI as a system thinking as the base. We need to work with rules. And then on top of that, then you can build a generative AI model. Without a computation AI model, you cannot build a generative AI model because you'll just be turning to meshes and possibilities within the variants and the rules. And this is what I call outcome-based AI, that then you can then select what you want with precision. And here's also the problem now with a lot of tools is that they don't teach you anything, right? It's super easy to use. It's like, I call it the race to useful laziness. I feel that apps nowadays are just trying to make us as lazy as possible. They're just trying to tell you that, just write something for me, build an app, right? And the fun part is I'm talking to customers, it's like, if you can't generate a floor plan at the first go, I'm not buying it. And that's ridiculous. The expectations are over the roof, and that's not how we want to live in the future, right? And that's not how it should be. And this is an app called D5 Blender. It's using what I would like to say diffusion models really well because it layers in real world context, but it kind of preserves the idea and understands how it is and makes it super easy to use. And here's the problem in a lot of tools, and you will find this problem more and more prominent in the next 5 years to come, right? Because there are a lot of desktop programs. They do a lot of stuff. They do everything, but there's long learning curve. And I can see that a lot of students now, even in the industry, they don't want to do that because it's too hard to use, right? And on the other hand, you have a tool like, let's say, Premiere Pro versus CapCut. It's web. There's no learning curve, I actually seen my mom, who's quite old, make a better video than I do. And I asked her, like, what tool do you use? It's like, she said, CapCut. Because there's just so many templates out there and they allow you to do these things really, really fast and they are made for an audience, right? And here's the fundamental problem with AEC industry is that we are using a lot of legacy tools that get us the precision that we need, right? But none of them are easy to use and not a lot of them has easy to use automation. Now, Revit has some automation. Definitely Dynamo with Grasshopper, you can do whatever you want. But a lot of people don't realize is that it's just too difficult for people to learn. I teach students Grasshopper. I've been teaching them for 4 years now with 4 different batches. And I can tell you the good students take at least 3 to 4 weeks to master the basics of computation thinking itself. And you can imagine the wider population, they can't use it. So if we were to solve anything related in this field, we need to build something that is here, right? It needs to have automation, no doubt, but it also needs to be super easy to use. Now, I'm not claiming that Podium is that. I'm just thinking that if you want to do something along that line, that's where we should be. Because if you have a tool right now that's super easy to use but has no automation, then there's no point because AI is going to essentially do a lot of that for you one way or another. So I think this is actually the future of architecture and digital transformation, not image generation, AI or LLMs. I think those are overhyped and have no outcome. I'm just going to introduce Podium a little bit, right? So I work at Podium and essentially this is the problem we're trying to solve here. I come from the architectural background and we have software people working on it. And what we have is domain experts that every day we're trying to look for problems to make it automatable and make it super easy for the automation to happen and to be customized, right? And this is what the basis, the vision of the product is. It's essentially we have a lot of templates that you can take any messing, do the craft that you want, apply automation on it, and you can generate a structure model and an MEP model out of it. Super fast, within minutes. Now that's the dream. And what we want architects to do at the end of the day is just to optimize. Optimize, sell, and coordinate. I think that's the most important part. The heavy lifting must be done with the software. The tagging of BIM should not be done by you, because I feel that BIM is just an expensive way of paying people to be data labelers, essentially. And how we do that is it's very tedious, to be honest, because in the industry, there are very different regulations and standards. There's also a lot of know-how, and that is, to me, a lot of factors in experts that you need to download their brain. And there are also practical logic and key parts. So what we do is we don't take, let's say in Mumbai, there's like a DCR. We don't take the whole thing and ingest it. It's stupid. Okay. What we do is we take the principles of it. We look at it from a computation standpoint. What makes sense? What doesn't make sense? And what can be configured? And this is proprietary to us, that we work out a algorithm from that. And then we make it configurable. And on top of that, we layer with AI agents. So they work. And what they could do is then they understand the interrelationships between each other. An example is, if I have a tower, I just drag the height, tall and short. It immediately understands what needs to happen. So give an example in Mumbai, is that if you do a building more than 70 meters in our software, it understands that it needs 2 staircases. So it will find a way to insert 2 staircases that apply with the travel distances. And then it also runs a layer of vertical transport simulation to put the amount of lifts that are required based on the height and the size of the tower. So this kind of automation, I think, is then beneficial for designers to get outcomes rather than just generating beautiful forms. Okay. And how we do that is through a way of systems approach. It's not directional computation thinking. It's kind of like a systems thinking. It weighs and decides which factor is important, because we have a model that each of them have a unique role, and we are able to program our solving engine, which is our AI model, understand in which component it needs to talk to each other. And then you can see from here, we can scale it up. That's why we are able to solve for structure at any kind of form that you design within our platform, and also MEP routing, because it understands. So once we have programmed in the logic, it's then able to scale into different typologies. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I'm going to show you this, right? So what ends up is you could do feasibility studies really, really fast. And I think this would probably take you weeks to get to here, but this actually took us only an hour to come up with this amount of scenarios. In fact, we came out with 20 scenarios, right? And all has data rich. This is another example, is in the US. It's for an urban planning committee where they need to decide if they should raise the height limit for this plot of land if they were to hit about 700 or 800 units based on the existing rules. So you can see within an automation platform, how easy is it, because it has the rules already, to actually prove your point, right? Instead of hiring an architect, getting a code compliance guy, getting a modeler in, you see how an idea of a computation design engine could help you prove your point much faster. You still need a human here to do the work, but the work gets done and the point gets across much faster because it's 3D and much more accurate. Of course, behind it is all the numbers that you can digest. And of course, we done some really fun stuff, because there's Nano Banana now, so you can generate renderings really fast, just for the fun of it, right? And behind this is really simple. We have the templates that are smart. You change the number, it changes the layout. And then from here, this is what I'm talking about, right? From any building, it can generate a structure layout with full columns, walls, piles, and pile caps. So all this model is all done by AI. It's not done by any human, because we have the engine behind it that runs. So you just need to design, and it will solve for the thing. So I wouldn't say engineers are out of a job, because this gets us only to about 80% accuracy. But you can imagine the time taken to actually just construct this model on ETABS, because we have the model already, you can bring it to ETABS. It just saves you the amount of time, right? So a lot of times now, then the thinking is back to the systems thinking approach. When I design a building, a lot of times designers consider how much effort it's going to take me, because I don't want to work late, right? But now it's no longer a consideration, because you can get results really fast. So some of our customers are already asking things like, okay, if I were to use a hollow core slab versus a in situ thing, what's the trade-off? Can I make more money from my consultancy? Can I make more money for the client, right? Can I make more profit out of it? So they are already considering in terms of what they should be considering in the first place, which is design. And they're not arguing over, I don't want to change the design because it takes too much time. It's out of my budget, right? So people spend more time doing more meaningful stuff, I would say, and you can get all the data out of it, right? Just at the click of your fingers. So to me, this is kind of game changing in a way we can approach design. And again, as well, MEP model. So none of this is done by humans. It's all generated by our AI model based on the design of a factory. And you can see it has a posts and beams, the MEP routing, the sizing of the chillers, the sizing of the lifts, and the, I'll say the rough foundation, which is power and power caps. And how do we do this at the end? It's very simple, right? It's because we have a object model, right? And this graph model, we're going to open the API up in mid of this year. It's based on this graph that you can add any information you want onto it, right? And you can query any parts of this graph. So if you ask me, what this means is that if you are a programmer and you're familiar with Grasshopper, is that you can then think about all the objects that you want within a building that is created in our system. You can then code in using a Claude, for instance, an LLM, and understand the rules and create your own system solving. Because at the end of the day, a lot of engineering problems and challenges are essentially just algorithms that needs to be solved in conjunction with other considerations. So all you have to do is code up that considerations. It will read the other considerations and get to a solution. And that's what we're trying to build here. I'm not going to bore you with this. It's to show that we do have a technology stack and API. So if you want to talk about your company using it, you can contact me. But I just want to end off here is that thinking in systems means that you are not looking at the linear workflow. That means if you work hard, you will make money. I think that's a very old way of thinking. And that shouldn't be how we should think about the world and how we should work. Using technology and thinking about the future, if you're in the build industry, is to weigh different conditions all the time and see how each of them could mutually benefit each other and what are the trade-offs so that you can work on each other. So one of the things that I sort of saw an opportunity was, could we sell buildings in a different way through technology? And that has never been done before. And one of the opportunity was to a developer that was our customer and said that, give me a better price. You sign up for us. But I'm going to show you how to sell buildings better because they have basically an industrial plot of land. And they said that a lot of times investor comes in, they say, I want to buy this land, but they don't know how much it is. They don't know what they can build there. So we said, we have the software, bring the customer in. The customer just types codes, a few lines and tell us what they want to do. And they also can drag and drop. And instantly we give them the cost, the massing, and a simulation of how their future building is going to look like with a report. And that brought them quite a few interesting sales topics because they got some customers in and they've never seen real estate selling like that before. So I think this is fundamentally a change in using technology to approach what is fundamentally a very traditional and long sales cycle approach in real estate. So I'm going to end off here and saying that what we learn in AEC or in the design world is that a lot of times we do design thinking. It's a very human-centered way to define problems. But systems thinking is a way to see relationships, feedback loops, and incentives, and unintended effects over time. And I feel that with the advent of AI, we are able to do that because we can get every single linear approach, some outputs that we can, and we are then able to link them together and weigh cause and effect. And that to me is the one thing that an AI wouldn't be able to replace because it's not able to do that judgment. And the judgment needs to come from a human because we live in a human-centric world and the social systems together. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Quentin. I appreciate the time. I'm sure everyone else does. If